Princess Era stood by the tall window in her chamber, watching the 3 moons of her world rise over the silver towers of the capital city. Her slender fingers, each with one extra joint than a human's, pressed against the cool glass. This might be the last time she would see this view. "Your Highness, it is time." The voice behind her was flat, without warmth. Era turned to face Mech, her attendant since childhood. Even he could not hide the shame in his eyes. In Niveri society, worth was measured by what you could give to the future. And Era, despite her royal blood, could give nothing. "I am ready," she said, though she was not. The Niveri High Council had made their decision 3 cycles ago. Princess Era, third daughter of the Supreme Leader, was defective. After 10 attempts with 10 different high-ranking males, her body had rejected all genetic material. She was barren, a dead end in their carefully planned bloodlines. But the humans had arrived 5 cycles ago, with their noisy ships and strange ideas. The Niveri needed human resources and trade routes. The humans needed Niveri technology. A deal was struck, and Era was part of that deal. "The transport awaits. Your belongings have been loaded," Mech said, gesturing to the door. Era nodded. She had been allowed to pack only 1 small case of personal items. The rest, her royal clothes, her books, her scientific instruments, were deemed unsuitable for Earth. The corridor outside her rooms was empty. No family waited to say goodbye. This was not a celebration, but an exile disguised as diplomacy. The Supreme Leader, her father, had not spoken to her since the arrangement was announced. Her 2 sisters, both with healthy offspring growing in the nursery chambers, had sent formal messages wishing her productive integration with the human species. The transport bay was equally empty when they arrived. Only a small official delegation waited beside the sleek silver shuttle that would take her to the human ship in orbit. Council Member Tao stepped forward, datapad in hand. "Princess Era, you understand your duty in this arrangement. I am to go to Earth as the wife of a human diplomat, to show the Niveri commitment to our alliance." Era recited the words she had been made to practice. "Yes, and you will report regularly on human activities and behaviors. Your condition makes you ideal for this role, as there is no risk of producing hybrid offspring that might complicate matters." Era flinched at the words, but kept her face smooth. Showing emotion was considered primitive among her people. The irony that she was being sent to live among the most emotional species in the known galaxy was not lost on her. "The human, Jeho Kim, has been told you are a gift of goodwill. He does not know of your defect," Tao continued. "The humans are too primitive to understand our genetic standards." "And if he finds out?" Era asked. Tao's face showed a rare moment of expression, something like disgust. "Humans keep defective pets and even defective offspring. They find value in strange things. He will likely not care." A notification chimed on Tao's datapad. "The human ship is ready to receive you. Are there any questions before you depart?" Era wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Would she ever return? Would anyone from home ever visit? What would happen if the human rejected her? But she knew there were no good answers. "No questions," she said. Mech handed her the small case containing her few allowed possessions. "Safe journey, Your Highness," he said, with the smallest break in his professional tone. Era boarded the shuttle alone. As the door sealed behind her, she did not look back at the world that had decided she was worthless. The shuttle hummed to life, rising smoothly into the purple sky. Ahead, barely visible, was the much larger human ship where she would begin her journey to Earth. To the husband who didn't know he was getting damaged goods, the human space station orbiting Earth was busy and loud. Era felt her ears ring from the noise as she stepped off the transport ship. After 2 weeks in space, she had hoped for a quiet arrival. Instead, she found chaos. People rushed in all directions. Their clothes were colorful, not like the clean silver and white of Niveri fashion. They talked loudly, laughed openly, and some even touched each other as they passed. Era stayed close to the wall, trying not to be noticed. "Princess Era, A tall human in a blue uniform approached her. "I'm Captain Lee. Welcome to Earth Station 1. Your husband is waiting in the diplomatic lounge." Husband. The word felt strange. On Niveri, they used terms like genetic partner or reproduction match. Husband sounded so permanent. Captain Lee led her through the busy halls to a quieter section, marked with Earth's diplomatic symbol. He stopped at a door and gestured for her to enter. "Good luck," he said with a smile that showed teeth. Era wasn't sure if this was a threat display or not. The room inside was simple but comfortable. A man stood by the window, looking out at the blue sphere of Earth below. He turned when the door opened, and Era got her first look at Jae-ho Kim. He was taller than she expected. Niveri males were usually short and slender. Jae-ho was broad-shouldered with dark hair cut short. His face was open, with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled at her. "Princess Era," he said, bowing deeply. "I'm Jae-ho. It's an honor to meet you." Era remembered her training and gave the formal Niveri greeting to a genetic superior, though she knew he wasn't one. "No need for that," Jae-ho said quickly. "We're equals here." "Equals?" Era stared at him, confused. On Niveri, no one was equal. Everyone had their place in the genetic hierarchy. "Please, sit down," Jae-ho said, pointing to a comfortable chair. "You must be tired from your journey." Era sat stiffly, unsure what to do with her hands. Should she begin reporting on human behaviors now? Should she offer genetic samples? The council hadn't been clear about when her duties began. "Would you like something to drink? Eat?" Jae-ho asked. "I brought proper Niveri nutrition cubes," she said. "I will not need human food." Jae-ho smiled. "Those cubes might be nutritious, but I bet they don't taste good. Earth has amazing food. It's one of our best features." His casual manner confused her. Wasn't this a political arrangement? Why was he talking about food? "I don't understand," Era said finally. "What are your expectations of me?" Jae-ho's smile faded. He sat down across from her. "Did they explain anything to you?" "I am to be your wife as part of the alliance. I will report on human activities. And I will." She paused, remembering Council Member Teo's words. "I will not produce offspring. I am defective." Jae-ho's face changed. His eyebrows drew together. Was this anger? Disappointment? "First," he said in a quieter voice, "you are not defective. That's a terrible word to use for anyone. Second, I volunteered for this arrangement because I believe in building bridges between our species, not because I wanted a political spy or someone to have children with." "You volunteered." Era couldn't hide her surprise. Why would anyone volunteer to take a barren wife? Jae-ho sighed. "On Earth, people get married for many reasons. Love, companionship, shared goals. Having children is only one possible reason, not the main purpose." Era thought about this. It seemed wasteful, inefficient, but also freeing. "I have 2 friends I'd like you to meet," Jae-ho continued. "Du-Yun is a xenobiologist. She can help make sure your health needs are met here. And Hai is a cultural anthropologist. She can help you understand human customs." "You have female friends?" Era asked, surprised again. On Niveri, males and females interacted only for official purposes or reproduction. Jae-ho laughed. "Of course, Earth is very different from Niveri, Princess Era. I hope you'll give us a chance to show you that different doesn't mean worse." For the first time since leaving her home, Era felt a small spark of curiosity. Perhaps this exile wouldn't be as terrible as she had feared. Earth was heavy. That was Era's first thought as she stepped out of the shuttle onto actual Earth ground. Her home planet had less gravity, and her body felt like it was being pulled down by invisible hands. "You'll get used to it," Jae-ho said, noticing her struggle. "Your muscles will become stronger in a few weeks." They were at Jae-ho's home, a small house outside the city with trees and open space around it. The air smelled different from the clean, filtered air on Niveri. It was full of strange scents, plants, soil, and something cooking nearby. I thought we would live in a diplomatic building, Era said, looking around. I requested a private home, Jaiho explained. I thought you might want space to adjust without reporters and officials watching your every move. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. Jiho showed her to a bedroom with its own bathroom. This is your room, he said. I'm across the hall if you need anything. We have separate sleeping chambers, Era asked. This was not what she expected. Jiho's face turned slightly red. I thought you would want your own space. This arrangement is unusual for both of us. We should take time to know each other first. Era nodded, though she didn't fully understand. On Nivari, marriage was a contract, not a relationship that needed time. The next days were difficult. Earth's sun was brighter than Era was used to. The food, though Jaiho tried to find things she could eat, made her stomach hurt. And there were so many rules she didn't know. When to speak, when to be quiet, how close to stand to people. One morning, Jiho found her trying to lift a heavy box in the garden. What are you doing? He asked, rushing to help her. Building muscle to adapt to Earth gravity, she explained. I read that human exercise involves lifting heavy objects. Jaiho laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. That's weight training, yes, but you should start with lighter weights. Here, let me show you. He spent the afternoon teaching her proper exercises, careful not to push her too hard. When she got tired, they sat in the garden, and he told her stories about growing up on Earth. Did you always want to be a diplomat? She asked. No, I wanted to be an explorer when I was young, Jaiho said, to find new worlds and meet new people. I guess in a way, diplomacy lets me do that. A week later, officials from Nivari came to check on Era. 3 tall, silver-robed figures arrived without warning. Jiho welcomed them politely, but Era felt herself becoming tense and quiet, like she had been on Nivari. Council member Tao was among them. Princess Era, are you functioning adequately in Earth conditions? He asked, not even looking at Jiho. Yes, council member, she answered formally. And you are gathering useful information on human behaviors. Before she could answer, Jiho stepped forward. Princess Era is my wife, not your spy. If Nivari wants information about Earth, you can ask through proper diplomatic channels. Tao looked at Jiho as if seeing him for the first time. The princess belongs to Nivari. Her primary duty is to her people. No, Jiho said firmly. On Earth, people don't belong to anyone but themselves. Era makes her own choices now. Era stared at Jiho in shock. No one spoke to Nivari council members that way, and no one had ever defended her before. The Nivari officials left quickly after that, clearly unhappy. When they were gone, Era turned to Jiho. They will be angry. They might punish you through the alliance. Jiho shrugged. Some things are more important than politics. Your dignity is one of them. That night, Era looked up at Earth's single moon from her window. It was smaller than any of Nivari's 3 moons, but somehow it seemed brighter. For the first time, she wondered if being sent to Earth wasn't a punishment after all, but something else entirely. Something like freedom. 1 month after arriving on Earth, Era woke up feeling sick. Her skin, normally a soft lavender color, had turned a dull gray. Her head hurt, and she could barely get out of bed. Jiho, she called weakly. He was there in seconds, his face worried when he saw her. You need a doctor, he said, already reaching for his communication device. No human doctors, Era said. They don't understand Nivari biology. Jiho paused. What about Duyun? She studied Nivari physiology. Era nodded. She had met Jiho's friend Duyun twice now, and liked the calm, smart woman who asked thoughtful questions without making Era feel like a specimen. Duyun arrived an hour later with portable medical equipment. She checked Era's vital signs and took small samples of blood and skin. I need to run some tests, she said, but I think it might be a simple vitamin deficiency. Earth's sun is different from your home star. Your body might not be making the right compounds. Jaiho stayed by Era's side all day, bringing her water and reading to her from Earth books. His concern seemed real, not just diplomatic politeness. It confused Era, but also made her feel safe. The next day, Du Yun returned with results and treatment. She gave Era supplements and a special light that mimicked Niveri's sun. Within days, Era felt better. But Du Yun seemed excited about something else. I found something interesting in your blood work, she told Era. Your reproductive system isn't broken like the Niveri claimed. It's just different. Era sat up straighter. What do you mean? Du Yun pulled out a tablet and showed Era complex diagrams. From what I can tell, your egg cells have an unusual membrane structure. It's probably why they rejected Niveri sperm, but it's not a defect. It's a variation. But I failed 10 reproductive attempts, Era said. The finest genetic males on Niveri couldn't produce offspring with me. That's because Niveri have been engineering their genetics for too long, Du Yun explained. I've been studying your species' medical records. For centuries, you've been selecting for certain traits and eliminating others. Of course, Era said. We remove weakness and emphasize strength. Du Yun shook her head. But that creates genetic bottlenecks. Your people have been getting more and more similar genetically. The DNA has less variation, less ability to adapt to new challenges. Jaiho, who had been quiet, spoke up, like how some Earth species die out because they can't adapt to new conditions. Exactly, Du Yun said. Era, your condition might actually be an evolutionary adaptation, your body trying to create more genetic diversity. Era stared at them both. Could it be true? Was she not defective, but evolved? I'd need to run more tests, Du Yun continued. But there's something else interesting. Your egg cell structure has similarities to certain human cell types. What does that mean? Jaiho asked. Du Yun looked uncomfortable. It's just a theory, but Era's reproductive system might be more compatible with human genetics than with modern Niveri genetics. The room went silent. Era felt like she couldn't breathe. Are you saying I could have children with a human but not with my own kind? The idea was both shocking and strangely hopeful. I don't know yet, Du Yun admitted, but it's possible. Evolution sometimes takes strange paths. After Du Yun left, Era sat by the window, watching earthbirds fly past. Her mind was full of new possibilities. All her life, she had been told she was broken. What if she wasn't? What if she was just ahead of her time? Are you okay? Jaiho asked gently, sitting beside her. I don't know, Era answered honestly. If Du Yun is right, I'm not what my people think I am. I don't know what that makes me. Jaiho smiled at her. It makes you Era. That's enough. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Era smiled back. 2 months passed. Era learned more about Earth each day. She tried new foods, watched human entertainment, and even started to enjoy the feel of sun on her skin. Earth's gravity no longer made her tired. Her body had grown stronger. But the biggest change was how she felt about Jaiho. They had settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings they had breakfast together. Jaiho would go to work at the diplomatic office, while Era studied Earth culture or helped Du Yun with research. Evenings they would share a meal and talk about their day. Jaiho never pushed her for more than friendship. He never mentioned Du Yun's theory about their possible genetic compatibility. He simply treated her with kindness and respect. One evening, Era found herself watching Jaiho as he cooked dinner. His hands moved confidently as he chopped vegetables. He hummed a song she didn't know. What are you thinking about? He asked, catching her stare. On Niveri, males don't cook, she said. Food is prepared by machines or lower-ranking females. Jaiho smiled. My mother taught me to cook. She said no child of hers would grow up helpless in a kitchen. Your mother sounds wise, Era said. She would have liked you, Jaiho replied, then looked sad. Would have. She died 3 years ago. Heart problem. Era felt a strange pain in her chest. Without thinking, she reached out and touched Jaiho's hand. On Niveri, casual touch was rare, even between partners. But here on Earth, she had seen how touch could comfort. Jaiho looked surprised but didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his hand and gently held hers. Something changed between them that night. A door opened that neither had been ready to open before. A week later, news came that worried Jaiho. A group called Earth First was holding protests against the alliance with Niveri. They claimed aliens were taking human jobs and resources. It's just a small group of angry people, Jaiho told Era. But be careful when you go out. 2 days later, Era and Jaiho were leaving a diplomatic dinner when they heard shouting. A crowd of protesters had gathered outside. Aliens go home, they yelled. Some held signs with ugly pictures of Niveri. Security guards moved to protect them, but someone threw a rock. It hit Era's shoulder. Jaiho immediately pulled her behind him, shielding her with his body. Another rock flew. This one hit Jaiho's head. He fell to the ground, blood running down his face. Jaiho, Era screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. Security finally reached them, pushing back the crowd. At the hospital, Era waited while doctors treated Jaiho. Du Yun and Hai arrived to sit with her. He will be okay, Du Yun assured her. The cut looks worse than it is. He put himself in danger for me, Era said, still shocked. Why would he do that? Hai looked at her with kind eyes. Because he cares about you, Era, probably more than he's admitted to himself. When Era was finally allowed to see Jaiho, his head was wrapped in white bandages. He looked pale, but smiled when he saw her. You're okay? He asked immediately. I'm not the one in a hospital bed, Era said, fighting an urge to touch his face. I was worried about you. Why did you do that? Era asked. Put yourself in danger. Jaiho looked confused by the question. It was instinct. I couldn't let you get hurt. On Niveri, no one would risk harm for a defective female. Self-sacrifice for others was considered illogical, a waste of resources. But as Era looked at Jaiho's bandaged head and concerned eyes, she realized something important. The Niveri might be more advanced in technology, but humans understood something her people had forgotten: the value of connection, of caring for each other simply because it made life worth living. And somehow, without planning to, Era had begun to care for this human more than she had ever cared for anyone on her home world. Jaiho recovered quickly from his injury. Within a week, he was back at work. Though Era noticed he tired more easily than before, she found herself watching him carefully, bringing him tea when he looked tired, making sure he rested when needed. You don't have to take care of me, Jaiho told her one evening. I want to, Era replied simply. Meanwhile, Du Yun continued her research. She had asked for more samples from Era and spent long hours in her lab. 3 weeks after the protest incident, she called and asked them both to come to the lab right away. Her face was excited when they arrived. I've confirmed my theory, she said, pointing to complex images on her screen. Era, your reproductive system isn't incompatible with all Niveri males. It's just incompatible with the current genetic profile of Niveri males. I don't understand, Era said. Your species has been engineering its genetics for too long, Du Yun explained. You've been selecting the same traits over and over, creating less and less diversity. Your body is essentially rejecting what it sees as too similar to itself. Like how plants won't self-pollinate, Jaiho asked. Similar, Du Yun nodded. But here's the really interesting part. She pulled up a new image. Era's egg cells would likely accept genetic material that is different enough to create healthy diversity. Different like what? Era asked, though she suspected the answer. Du Yun took a deep breath. Like human genetic material. The room went silent. Jaiho looked at his hands. Era felt her heart beat faster. Are you saying I could have children with a human? Era finally asked. In theory, yes, Du Yun said. I've run computer simulations. There would be challenges, but with medical help, it appears possible. The child would be a hybrid, with traits from both species. Would the child be healthy? Jai-Ho asked quietly. The simulations suggest yes. In fact, remarkably so. The combination might actually create stronger resistance to disease than either species has alone. Era sat down, her legs suddenly weak. All her life she had been told she was flawed, broken, useless to her society. Now it seemed she might not be broken at all, just waiting for the right partner from a different world. There's something else, Du Yun said, looking uncomfortable. If this is true for Era, it might be true for other Nevari in future generations. Your entire species might eventually face the genetic dead end that Era's body is already rejecting. You mean Nevari might need to mix with human DNA to survive? Jai-Ho asked. Eventually, yes, or with some other compatible species. Genetic diversity is essential for long-term survival. Era thought about the Nevari Council, with their pride in genetic purity. They would hate this idea. They would reject it completely. No one can know about this, she said suddenly. The Nevari would never accept it. Du Yun looked guilty. I've already shared my research with my department. It's too important to keep quiet. This could help both our species. 2 days later, Era received a message from Nevari. The High Council demanded she return home immediately for medical examination and research purposes. They didn't mention Du Yun's discovery, but the timing couldn't be coincidence. They found out. Era told Jai-Ho, showing him the message. They'll want to study me, use me to find a way to fix their genetic problems without mixing with humans. You don't have to go, Jai-Ho said. You live on Earth now. You have rights here. I'm still a Nevari citizen. They can force me to return. Jai-Ho's face grew determined. Not if you're my wife in more than name. Earth law protects the spouses of citizens. If our marriage is real, they can't take you against your will. Era looked at him in surprise. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything that you don't want, Jai-Ho said softly. But I need you to know something. These past months, I've grown to care for you, not as a diplomatic duty, as a person, as Era. For the first time since coming to Earth, Era felt tears form in her eyes. On Nevari, crying was considered childish. But here, with Jai-Ho, she didn't need to hide her feelings. I care for you too, she whispered. A week passed after the Nevari Council's message. Era and Jai-Ho discussed their options daily. They decided to make their marriage official under Earth law. A small ceremony was held with only Du Yun and Hai as witnesses. Afterward, Jai-Ho filed papers claiming Era as his legal wife with all protections under Earth laws. But the Nevari would not give up easily. 3 large Nevari ships arrived in Earth orbit without warning. Earth's defense systems went on alert. News channels showed the ships and spoke of possible conflict. This is about me, Era said, watching the reports with horror. They wouldn't risk war just to get me back. Unless you're more valuable to them than we thought, Jai-Ho said. If Du Yun is right about the Nevari facing genetic problems, you might be the key to their future. The next day, a formal diplomatic message arrived. The Nevari were sending a delegation to Earth to retrieve their property, meaning Era. They claimed she was still bound by Nevari law, and that the marriage agreement had been between governments, not individuals. Earth's Global Council met to discuss the situation. Jai-Ho was called to speak, as was Era. They waited nervously outside the council chamber. What if they decide to give me back to keep peace? Era asked. Jai-Ho took her hand. I won't let that happen. We'll find another way. Inside the chamber, views were divided. Some council members wanted to protect Era. Others feared angering the technologically advanced Nevari. Princess Era was sent as a diplomatic gift, said one official. Refusing to return her could damage our alliance. She's not a gift. She's a person, Jai-Ho argued. On Earth, people can't be owned, traded, or given away. The Nevari don't see it that way, another official said. And we need their technology. While the council debated, Du Yun and Hai were busy. They had contacted reporters, scientists, and rights groups. They told Era's story, how she had been labeled defective and sent away, only to discover she might be the key to saving both species. Public opinion began to shift. People held signs supporting Era at government buildings. Scientists published articles about the benefits of genetic diversity. Religious leaders spoke about the value of all life. The Nevari delegation arrived 3 days later. They landed at the main diplomatic port in 5 identical silver ships. 10 tall, silver-robed figures emerged, led by Supreme Leader Kan, Era's father. Era hadn't seen him in months. He looked older, his silver skin duller than she remembered. The Earth Global Council arranged a meeting with the Nevari delegation. Jiho and Era were asked to attend. The room was tense as both sides took their seats. "We have come for the princess," Supreme Leader Kan said without greeting. "She belongs to Nevari." The head of Earth's council spoke carefully. "Princess Era has married an Earth citizen and is protected by our laws." "The marriage was political, not personal," another Nevari said. "She remains our subject." Jiho stood up. "Era is my wife by her choice and mine. Earth recognizes this marriage as real and binding." Era watched her father's face for any sign of feeling. Concern, anger, even disappointment. She saw nothing but cold determination. "The princess is vital to Nevari research," he said. "We are prepared to take stronger measures if needed." It was a threat. Everyone knew it. Era had been quiet, but now she stood. All eyes turned to her. "I would like to speak," she said in a clear voice. "Not as a princess or a wife, but as someone who has lived in 2 worlds." Her father frowned, but the Earth Council nodded for her to continue. "I was born on Nevari, but I have found my home on Earth," Era said. "For the first time in my life, I am valued for who I am, not for what I can provide to the genetic pool." She looked directly at her father. "I will not return to be a research subject. I am a person with rights, not property to be claimed." Her voice grew stronger. "And if the Nevari truly care about their future, they will listen to what Earth scientists have discovered. Our species might need each other more than you realize." The room fell silent. The confrontation had just begun. Supreme Leader Kan stared at his daughter with cold eyes. "You speak of rights," he said, "but you forget your duty to Nevari. Your genetic makeup could save our species." "I haven't forgotten anything," Era replied. "I'm offering to help. As a free person, not as a test subject." The Earth Council leader leaned forward. "Perhaps we can find a solution that benefits both sides." "There is nothing to discuss," another Nevari official said. "We have the right to reclaim our citizen." Jiho stood beside Era. "And what will you do if Earth refuses?" Supreme Leader Kan's expression didn't change. "We have waited patiently. Now our patience ends. We have disabled your satellite systems. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. You will return the princess, or we will take her." The room erupted in shocked voices. Earth officials checked their communication devices, finding them dead. "This is an act of war," the Earth Council leader said. "It is an act of necessity," Kan replied. Du Yun, who had been allowed to attend as a scientific advisor, stepped forward. "Supreme Leader, before you take action that cannot be undone, please consider the research findings." She held out a data tablet. "Princess Era's condition isn't a defect. It's an evolutionary response to genetic stagnation in your species." The Nevari scientists in the delegation looked interested despite themselves. "Your scientists can verify everything," Du Yun continued. "But forcing Era to return won't solve your problems. You need a cooperative approach." Supreme Leader Kan waved his hand dismissively. "We will study these findings after the princess returns with us." "No," Era said firmly. "I will not go." Kan looked at his daughter with something like surprise. On Nevari, no one said no to the Supreme Leader. "You have no choice," he said. Jaiho stepped forward. There is always a choice. Earth has been respectful of Navari, but we are not helpless. As if on cue, the building lights flickered. Then the screens in the room lit up, showing Earth ships rising to meet the Navari vessels. We have been developing our own technology, the Earth Council leader said. We hoped never to need it against friends. Kant looked at the screens, his silver face showing surprise for the first time. Your ships are primitive. But there are many of them, Jaiho said. And humans fight hardest when protecting those they care about. The room fell silent as everyone watched the screens. The Earth ships formed a protective ring around the planet, not attacking, but clearly ready to defend. Du Yun broke the silence. War benefits no one, but cooperation could save both our worlds. She turned to the Navari delegation. Your genetic pool is shrinking. Each generation has less diversity, more problems. Era's body recognized this danger and rejected it. Others will follow. Within a few generations, your entire species could face reproductive collapse. The Navari scientists whispered among themselves. What Du Yun suggests, Era said, is that instead of taking me by force, we work together. My body may be compatible with humans. Other Navari may develop the same trait. This could be the beginning of something new for both our species. Supreme Leader Kan looked at his daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. You would help us, after we cast you out. I would help both our worlds, Era said. Not as a princess, not as a subject, but as someone who belongs to both Earth and Navari now. Hai, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. In Earth's history, cultures that closed themselves off eventually died. Those that shared and mixed with others survived and thrived. The Earth Council leader nodded. We offer partnership, not surrender. Research sharing, cultural exchange, and yes, perhaps even genetic cooperation for those who freely choose it. Supreme Leader Kan looked from the screens showing Earth's defensive fleet to his daughter standing tall beside her human husband. For the first time in Era's memory, her father looked uncertain. The choice before him was clear: war or cooperation, the old way or a new path. Everyone waited for his decision. The silence in the room stretched on as Supreme Leader Kan considered his options. Everyone watched him, waiting. Finally, he looked at his daughter. You truly believe this path is best? He asked Aura. I do, she answered. War would hurt both our peoples. Working together could save us both. Kan turned to one of the Navari scientists. Is what they say about our genetic problems true? The scientist looked uncomfortable, but nodded. We have been seeing more reproductive failures in recent years. More defects. If their theory is correct, it would explain much. Kan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he seemed different somehow. Less rigid. We came prepared for conflict, but perhaps wisdom requires us to consider another way. The tension in the room eased slightly. I propose a research alliance, Kan said. Earth and Navari scientists working together. Princess Era may remain on Earth if she agrees to participate in the research. As a partner, not a subject, Jaiho insisted. As a partner, Kan agreed, though the words seemed strange to him. Over the next weeks, a new treaty was created. Earth and Navari would share scientific knowledge. Special attention would be given to genetic research that might help the Navari overcome their problems. Era would serve as an advisor to both sides. Her unique position as someone who understood both worlds made her valuable in a way no one had expected. They didn't want me because they thought I was broken, she told Juho one evening as they walked in their garden. Now they value me because of that very same difference. Jaiho smiled. Sometimes what looks like a flaw is really a gift we don't yet understand. 6 months later, Du Yun confirmed what her research had suggested. Era and Jiho could have children together. The medical procedure would be complex, but possible. The child would be the first of its kind, Du Yun explained. A true bridge between our species. Era and Jiho decided to try. It wasn't an easy choice. No one knew exactly what a half-human, half-Niveri child would be like, but they felt it was right for them. A year after the confrontation in the council room, Era gave birth to a daughter. She had Jaiho's dark hair and warm eyes, but her skin had a soft lavender glow like her mother's. The doctors confirmed she was perfectly healthy. They named her Min, which meant bright in Jaiho's language and future in Niveri. Supreme Leader Kan came to Earth to see his granddaughter. He seemed older, less certain of himself than before. "She is beautiful," he said, looking at the child with wonder. "I was wrong about many things." "We all were," Era replied, "but we can learn and grow." Other Niveri females began to show the same condition as Era. Their bodies rejected genetically similar mates, as if trying to force the species to find new genetic combinations. The Niveri had to change or face extinction. Some chose human partners, following Era's path. Others worked with scientists to find different solutions. But the old belief in genetic purity began to fade as they saw the strength in Min and the other new children. 3 years after Min's birth, Era was invited to speak at the Great Hall on Niveri. She stood before the High Council, the same people who had once called her defective, and sent her away. "When you gave me to a human, you thought you were discarding something broken," she told them. "Instead, you opened a door to the future." She looked around the hall at the faces of her former people. "We are all more than what others decide we are. Sometimes the things that make us different are the very things that make us valuable." Jaiho stood nearby, holding their daughter's hand. Min smiled at her mother, a child of 2 worlds who would never have existed if her mother had been what everyone expected her to be. The princess they had called Barren had not only proven them wrong, she had helped create a new beginning for 2 worlds. The end.